Thank you again for making the time to be here. And Marilyn, thank you for organizing this. I'm really
Mhm,
excited.
mhm,
So, what I wanted to do was talk about the idea of bringing inclusion to workplaces through compassion. And a little bit of a background about me is that I've been an advocate of workplace compassion for 6, 7 years now. Before that, I used to be a cancer biologist and I ran a business where I was taking care of seniors. So, a lot of life experiences kind of drove me to thinking about compassion and how it can impact our workplace experience. And which is why um, I created a framework which I've been teaching um, across the world, I mean, in different companies. And one of the things that I really noticed over time was that one of the biggest challenges that organizations are facing right now is that they are not able to embrace the oneness of that experience. And I wanted to offer a framework today based on compassion that could potentially help see the people in our workplace differently and how we interact with them differently. So let me start this with a story, right? Imagine that you are in a party, you've been invited to a party or a networking event, and the food is great, the drinks are amazing, and you're there and you realize that people have already formed their little clusters. There's groups of people with drinks in their hand, with their appetizers, and they are talking amidst each other. And you desperately want to belong to that setting. So what you do is you grab a drink and you believe that you have a lot of things to offer to these conversations. So you come and you sit and you try to laugh as they laugh and you try to interject. But every single group that you go to, you feel like you are kind of snubbed. You feel like you don't belong there. You kind of feel like people are ignoring you or acknowledging you and then immediately going back to the conversation. I went through this experience a few years ago in a networking event. And I'm still remembering the experience, the human experience that I went through, right? I'm wondering, yeah, am I doing something wrong? Am I dressed properly? Am I holding my drinks okay? And after a while, that conversation turns into, what's the easiest route to the door? You know, so how quickly can I get out of here? That's my thinking process. Now, this is a 3 hour event that I was in. Imagine the same thing happening in a workplace. You're stuck there for a long period of time and you've gotten in, everything looked great at the door, but now you're in and your people have already formed clusters. And you're trying hard to belong and you want to contribute to the conversations, but unfortunately, you don't have a place there anymore. Now, this is the opposite of what we are trying to do today. What we are going to try to do today is to create an experience that is the polar opposite of what we just described. And what I want to do is, and hopefully you're all in a safe space. So what I want you to do is share a few moments of a loving kindness meditation with me. So if that's okay with you, just a couple of minutes. I'm not going to take you through the long journey of metta and loving kindness that would take a long time. But what I want to point out is this idea of metta. Metta is a Pali word, which means loving kindness or friendship. And it is simply the recognition that all of us, irrespective of who we are and which part of the world we are in, what our background is, we all have the tendency, the ability, the capability to wish well for everybody, to have that sense of expansiveness. We can't always carry that expansiveness, but we all have that capacity to reach into ourselves and give an expansive sense of wellness for ourselves and the world around. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to invite you to sit in a space in a place that's comfortable for you. If you want to, you can close your eyes. If not, just have a soft gaze, looking forward. And this as a form of arrival, just take a deep breath in and hold and exhale. Simply bring your awareness to your breath. The idea is whatever is outside, whatever your day has been so far, and whatever is holds for you today, just this moment now, you are here in this moment with your breath in a space of gentle learning and gentle transformation. Once again, I'm going to invite you to consider that you, the people who love you, the people that you love, the strangers in your life, the cashiers, the cab drivers, the people who stand at intersections, the people who teach you by hurting you, the people who cause you discomfort and make you grow, the people who do not look like you, the people you do not know about, the people who have come and gone. Everybody on this little blue planet floating in space, everybody deserves to be happy, to be loved, to be wanted, to be included. So I invite you in your mind to repeat these words of affirmation. May we all be free from danger and anxiety. May we all be loved. May we all be happy. May we all be at ease. May we all be free from danger and anxiety. May we all be loved. May we all be happy. May we all be at ease. I invite you to let that sense of warmth settle into you. And carrying that beautiful message of oneness, whenever you're comfortable, I invite you to open your eyes. Welcome back to this reality. Thank you for participating. I appreciate this. What I want to do is take you on a quick journey of how we are going to spend the next 30, 40 minutes together, or 40 minutes, 50 minutes together. I've divided this presentation into three parts. The first is I want to get ourselves into an understanding of inclusion and compassion, and why, the case I'm going to make is why they are the same. They are not too different from each other. And the second one is I'm going to offer a framework on how in your workplace you can take this and create a shift in how you see the world around you, how you try to include people that are different from you. And finally, I'm going to invite you to become an advocate for inclusion outside your workplace and in your workplace. So let's first understand together the idea of inclusion and compassion. This is how Gallup describes inclusion. Inclusion refers to a cultural and environmental feeling of belonging. It is the sense in which employees feel valued, respected, accepted, and encouraged to fully participate in the organization. And I'm going to imagine you to create an emotional connection with what is presented here. Imagine that you are in a workplace, you're a new employee, and in that group, you feel that, again, like that initial story that I shared in that networking meeting. Imagine that you do not feel valued, that your opinions don't matter. People don't respect you for the skills and the value that you bring to this setting, and you don't feel accepted. And in that context, you don't feel that you want to give your best. You cannot give your best because you're afraid of raising your voice and sharing your opinion. In other ways, you don't feel psychologically safe. That's one setting. The idea of inclusion is, however, feeling where again you are in a new workplace and you feel that you are totally a part of this group, that you are a part of this pride. And again, humans, like many other animals, the greatest need is to feel belonged. You take away that belonging, you take away the power from within that person. And as an organization, you take the power away from the human value that it brings to the organization. So if you're valued, you're respected, you're accepted, and you're encouraged to fully participate, that's when inclusion is happening. And you can imagine when you are in a setting like that, you want to give your best. You're not looking for the easiest way out the door, so the turnover is less. You feel compelled to contribute your own ideas and opinions because you're not shot down and you belong to your tribe that accepts you. Your morale is high, the job satisfaction is better, productivity is more, engagement is high. So there's a lot of reasons why inclusion is should be a mainstay of a successful organization. But often organizations think about inclusion in the context of diversity and stop there. Diversity and inclusion are two different things, right? When you think of diversity, it's basically assembling a people. It is a strategic initiative. It's assembling a group of people who have differences in their genders, religions, race, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, education, any other attributes. And that kind of a diversity has been increasing in the US and globally for decades. In a while, there will be no more minorities, there will be no majorities, there will be, all groups of people all working together towards goals. And we know now, even at the current setting, because of the different, in biology, I used to be a biologist. In biology, we have this idea of a hybrid vigor. You have, different animals with different breeds, for example, different breeds of dogs. They come together. The offspring has a better vigor for survival. They have more disease resistance and live longer and all of that. So in an organization, you bring people with different perspectives, ideas, and orientations together in the same setting. Suddenly, there is a vigor. There is an opportunity for people to bring more to the setting rather than a monochromatic view of success. But diversity does not equate inclusion. You cannot stop by just hiring a bunch of people with different orientations and and uh, and genders and races and so on. It's important to make them feel belonged at the table, and that is a cultural and social and behavioral narrative. Same as bringing the being in a in a networking event, and somebody welcomes you into the group and say, by the way, why don't you share a little bit about you? Is a cultural, social, behavioral narrative that makes people want to give and share their best in that setting. And inclusion is important for diversity to thrive. As one of the HR leaders, I forget her name, she was sharing that inclusion attracts more diversity. We live in a world of glass doors, and you say, I feel belonged, I feel that I'm included in my workplace. You immediately write, you want to share that opinion to the world around you, to your friends, and you attract more talent. People from your own cultures, people from other cultures, they become part of that community and growth happens. As you can see from all of this conversation so far, while diversity is a strategic decision about hiring, about bringing people together, inclusion is an emotional experience. Inclusion is a human decision. and a group of humans feeling the same way about including others. That's the culture. A culture is like an ocean made of raindrops, many raindrops. And so the individual opinions and thoughts and behaviors about inclusion, they all come together to create that cultural narrative of inclusion. And the question is, being the emotional experience it is, how do you make that happen in a workplace? Because it's a mindset shift and that requires time, practice, and cultural support. This is where I, as the forever advocate of workplace compassion, feel excited, become excited. Because I think the idea of practicing compassion in a workplace becomes an opportunity. It changes the mindset, surely, but steadily. It is possible, and it is that's how it is done. So, what is compassion, right? So, in my mind, the simplistic way of looking at compassion is it's caring in action. It's the inner ability that we all possess to resonate with somebody else's challenge and ask, what can I do about it? Doing something about it. So, compassion is rooted in action. And it's a four-step process. And it starts with noticing and then feeling for the person who is going through the challenge, suspending the judgment around that suffering and for that person, and then asking, what can I do about it? The alleviation step. So noticing, feeling, suspending, and stepping into action. Right? It's a very difficult term for a lot of people to follow because it's an ancient word. Empathy, compassion, these are all ancient words. So over time, these words have taken a lot of meaning, right? Different people have taken given different attributes to the idea of compassion. So when I face a lot of resistance when I take this idea to workplaces and I talk to people. Let's say somebody who has been only in the engineering space for a long period of time, and I talk about compassion. There is an element of, maybe you should take this to a church. Maybe you should take this to a temple. And I say, no, I'm talking about a universal human experience here, and it's as relevant as the Dalai Lama says. It's as relevant to the workplace as it is to any facet of living. It takes a little bit of an education there, but from a very practical sense, I believe that as the rivers kind of come together to make the ocean happen, there is these different behaviors, different streams of behaviors that can go into creating a compassionate behavior, a compassionate experience. I believe that there's a self-compassion, the ability to put people first, the ability to be abundant in our giving, to be mindful in our thoughts and actions and our words, to embrace that oneness, to be compassionate and kind in our communication as much as possible, to be vulnerable to the right people in the right ways, to think big with perspective and purpose, and to practice gratitude. These are the different streams. I call these the 9 pillars of compassion. These 9 streams can come together, and with time and with practice, they change the mindset of the organization. And in our case, if you are looking at inclusion, compassion can make that happen. But before we talk about that, I want to once again, I explored the idea of compassion through a little um, situation, right? So imagine that you're walking on a long and lonely road with a friend, and there is a pit in the middle of that road, and a friend falls into that. There's no one else around. Now you could walk away; it's not your problem, or you can look down and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," and walk away. That's even worse. That's what you see in Facebooks and I'm so sorry for you kind of messages. Or you could feel so much in emotional resonance with that person that you could jump into that pit with that person. Feels good for a second, and then nothing else is happening because now you have disempowered yourself. Or you could go through these 4 steps. You could notice that your friend has fallen into the pit, and you emotionally resonate with that person. You say, what if it was me? What if I was in that pit as this other person? What if I take away the judgments that come in. I'm not here saying, you should have been a little bit more careful. You remember last year when you walked through the same path and you fell in, you're so clumsy. No judgments there, right? You just say it has happened. The situation is unfolding in front of your eyes. And the next question is, what can I do to help my friend? Even if it means walking away from that place, even if it means running to the nearby village, getting a ladder and coming back. So that's the four steps. A compassionate experience is incomplete without action. It is incomplete without emotion because then you are not driven to action. And it is incomplete if you do not overcome the judgments that and the biases that block you from action. So I want to pause here for a second because we are going into the next stage. I want to stop and quickly ask if you have a quick question or so that I can answer. Okay, we're good. All right, awesome. So let's go to this framework. Okay, so now we have the framework of what inclusion is. Hopefully, we all have a buy-in for how inclusion feels like in the workplace setting and why it's important. And we have a framework for how compassion operates, the decisions, the different parts that go into making a compassionate decision. We want to apply that in the context of inclusion. So the very first step of compassion is noticing. And the next four steps, what we are going to do, this is what we are going to do. We are going to take the four steps of a compassionate response and first apply it to somebody else in your organization who's not potentially not feeling included, who doesn't feel belong. And as a second step, we are going to see what if I was the person who is not being included, who is going through that inclusion challenge. So that's step number two. So let's first look at it in the context of you as a person who is empowered, who is in the organization. You're not going through the challenge right now, but it's possible that the structure of your organization or the people in your organization are not practicing inclusion, maybe from place of not knowing that it's important, however that is, but there is obviously some suffering happening, and you want to create a compassionate response in that setting, right? So the first step is to ask, how is your workplace? Take an unfettered look at how your workplace uh, diversity looks like. The very first step of noticing, the very first step of a compassionate response is noticing, and that is by getting to know the people that you're working with and asking how you can actively see the challenges. So let me take. Looks like I'm not able to move forward.
Oh, I'm somehow stuck in YouTube video, and I can't get back into the room. So you have your co-host, so you should be able to do everything.
Okay, awesome. No worries. I think I'm able to move right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the very first step of noticing is making the time to know people. There's a story about a professor who had a final exam, and he had two questions in the exam. He said the first question was a technical question, and that had 50% of the score. And then the other question was a simple question. Do you know the name of the lady who's cleaning our restrooms? And that had 50% of the score. Everybody thought that was a trick question, and they said, why are we supposed to know this? And when the grading came and everybody had scored really poorly, the professor explained, see, the majority of the learnings that you carry from your workplace or from your school, you're not going to apply in your life. But the simple idea of respecting and knowing the people that you're going to work with, that you're working with, that's probably the bigger lesson that has more ROI for you than anything technical any of the equations that you're learning today. So getting to know the people. So as you consider the diversity in your workplace, I'm going to invite you to ask, do you know the names of the people that you work with, and not just their names, their family settings? Do you recognize them as the humans they are beyond their identities and roles in the workplace? How do you know them as humans? And if you don't, and even if you do to some extent, I would invite you to have some conversations with them. Just get to know people. Let's have a coffee. And I've recognized that um, over coffee, people seem to ease up. They or sometimes a drink, but they ease up far better and get to open up than in the workplace. So you just say, why don't we go for a walk? Why don't we have a coffee together? And then listen, because listening and hearing are two different things, right? So to me, hearing is an experience of the ear, and listening is an experience of the heart. And listening, as we're going to see now, it's the ability to uh, listen to the story of the other person without biases, without adding our own stories to that experience. The second part of the compassion experience, as we saw, was the feeling, right? How much emotion are we attributing to this? Because unless we are moved by the person's lack of inclusion, if you see that somebody is not being included in that workplace, and we don't have an emotional response to it, if we don't empathize with that, there is no response that's going to happen. So what I want to do is share a little um, video from Kung Fu Panda. Um, I guess by now everybody has watched this movie. This is the first one. It's a really lovely movie. And if you didn't, here's a little background. So Po is a panda who has a very ordinary life as a noodle seller, and he adores kung fu and the Furious Five. Um, and they are these masters of kung fu who live in the Jade Palace. And by a series of quirky incidents, he ends up being selected as the Dragon Warrior, the one who is supposed to wield the ultimate power. But the day he is elected, the Furious Five, the masters of kung fu, are angry because they were not selected, and they think he is an abomination. He should not be in kung fu. So here's what happens that night. Okay, so hopefully you can hear the audio. So, so of course that's cute, and then you see how the whole transformation happens and how they welcome him and make him belong into the setting. So I just want us to tap into that emotion for a while, right? Once again, going back to the four steps: noticing, feeling, suspending judgment, and stepping into action. The very first step is we invited people into our conversational area, into our mindset, by inviting them into conversations and saying, let's get to know each other. And in that process, can I see the challenges that you're going through? Is there a way that I can make you feel belonged? But if they are going through challenges, this is the point where you see the emotion. And an action point around it is to ask, what if it was me? What if I was the person who was being excluded from that conversation, excluded from the experience? And the golden rule, as it says, is, treat others as you would treat yourself. And sometimes just applying that rule changes the conversation, because you see yourself in the other person's experience of non-inclusion. And the third part is bias. This is the biggest challenge for any inclusion to happen. There are conscious biases and there are unconscious biases. And the unconscious biases obviously are the ones that we don't even know that we carry. And sometimes we make decisions about race, gender, sex, and all of that, even though we know that that's not the right approach. And biases are a big block to inclusion. For example, in the 1970s, only 5% of the top orchestras had women in them, just 5%. In 20 years, that number became 35%. And the reason why that happened was not because there was, an additional training for women, or they had additional quotas for women. They just introduced one framework shift. And that one framework shift, one simple framework shift, design shift, was they made the auditions blind. And they said, we are only going to audition based on talent, and they don't know who that person is auditioning. That shifted, and in 20 years, that 5% representation of women in top orchestras became 35%. Biases are very, very difficult to acknowledge and to overcome. But the biggest way to overcome a bias is to become aware of our biases. I don't want to carry a label of being a biased person. It doesn't resonate with me. Nobody wants to carry that label. It's simply that we don't know. And sometimes we kind of believe that it's accepted as the norm, and we get along with that. But the awareness opens up the doors to the light and says, these things we can overcome. So I want to share a little video from Deloitte about biases and how we can shift them. I think it's a really powerful statement they are making there, because once we become aware of the biases that we carry, the unconscious and we can educate ourselves on that. There is so much information out there. We start owning our judgments, and that's the very first step to including the people in our workplace. And we started out this experience with the loving kindness meditation, right? A very short version of that. In that, we constantly expanding our circle of acknowledging that we all have the same needs for happiness and joy and success and in whatever things that we do. We could make that into a 1 minute experience, just as you walk into the door and in a meeting and see the diversity in that setting, and to say whatever biases I carry, whatever judgments I carry, beyond all of that, we are all human beings, and we all have the same need for love and happiness. May we all be happy, may we all be loved, may we all cherish this moment and experience together, so we can create win-wins. And that is a simple reminder, and every single time that we step into this into a meeting, we can do and create and shift our dialogues. The other big challenge is the messaging that we get every single day. um, Dictators, what's common for dictators throughout history, present, and everywhere, they focus on the separation of people. They always identify one group that they can pit against the other, and that's where they get their power. Let's eliminate the dictators and their messaging from our life. We can surround ourselves with positive messaging. We can start our day with ideas that say we are one, rather than those that say we are different from each other, those that identify our differences, and the way we can actually pit ourselves against each other. So I think those are a couple of ideas, about suspending judgment. If we can overcome this part about judgments, I think we are very well into the compassion response that we want for making inclusion in our life, in our workplace. The very last step is, with an awareness, now that we have noticed, now that we feel for that person's emotion, just as we would want to feel belong, we want the golden rule applied there. And then we say, you know, there is no judgments that's going to stop me from taking that compassionate stance. The next question is, what can I do? Ask. I think the great idea is for us to ask these people that we feel excluded, if we have built enough trust with them, to ask, how can I make you feel more belonged in this workplace setting? How can we do this together and create a win-win? And sometimes these acts don't have to be large, they don't have to be dramatic. It's These are micro acts. In fact, the most uh, impactful experiences are small events. I'm going to grab a cup of coffee, and I grab another a cup of coffee for you because I know you like coffee, and I say, would you like to have a cup? Like these small acts, the way I smile at you when we are coming up the elevator, the way I recognize you by your name, and say, how's your daughter today? Did she go to school all right? Right? This is what's going to make me feel included. Not major rewriting of not nothing against rewriting competency mapping for our organizations, but it's these micro actions that on a human scale, on an everyday scale, can make a difference. And if possible, creating support communities. Maybe we work in large organizations, maybe the messaging gets diluted when we move across teams, but we can band together people who see these ideas of compassion as a proper response to a lack of inclusion, to a lack of belonging. And that's where the magic can happen. to create support communities and give voice to those people who don't have a voice or who are afraid to speak up. So one of the major things is, I mean, this in this particular experience, we spoke about how we are noticing the challenge of somebody else and we are responding to it with compassion, but it doesn't always have to be a reactive response. Compassion, more often than not, is creating those circumstances, those opportunities. So it becomes a proactive experience. So proactively, we are stopping non-belonging. Proactively, we are stopping non-inclusion. As we hire, as we set the very first messaging as they enter the organization is to say, you are part of it. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that this is the experience that is norm for you in this organization. That's all fine when it comes to making others included. But more often than not, we fail to recognize that we are the ones who are going through challenges. You know, maybe I have a certain idea about my age stopping me from belonging to this organization, or my race, or my gender, or my sexual orientation. However, that is, it's important to start with noticing the same four steps: noticing our challenges, managing our emotions, not seeing ourselves as a victim, because there it's feeling for somebody, here it's managing our emotion and saying, I don't want to take on a victim stance, but I want to take the power of belonging into my hands and remove the self judgments, the gremlin voices, the biases that come into my mind, and step into action, educating myself, speaking up for my rightful place in the organization, not being held back by my limiting beliefs, and to belong to communities, to actively seek them out, and above all, on a consistent everyday basis, practice self-care, self-compassion, learning to be good friends to ourselves in the journey. So the final part of this is speaking up for inclusion. We're privileged because now we are actively thinking about the idea of inclusion and compassion, and we have that ability, that the bandwidth to do so. But there are others who might not have that opportunity. And when we are empowered, the greatest measure of our success is to enable that empowers us for others, right? So if your role requires you or allows you to be a mentor, or if it allows you to create resource groups, great way to do it. But it doesn't have to stop within the organization. I think it can expand outside the organization. And I want to share this beautiful story of a good friend. His name is Feroz VR. He is a senior vice president at SAP. In 2012 or 11, um, his son was born and was diagnosed with autism. His son is severely autistic in the sense that he is nonverbal. And he took that difficult experience and started to and asked, how can I learn from this experience? How can I come out of it? And one of the advice that he received was, use this as an opportunity for change, for making a difference in the lives of others. Use this as your life purpose. So as he read and he learned and he spoke to people, he realized the biggest challenge that most people who are parents of autistic children is, what are they going to do after I am gone? The biggest concern. And so he said, what if we can create opportunities for people who are in the spectrum? And instead of focusing on what they cannot do, which is what traditionally people were doing, he asked, what is it that they are good at? He realized that people in the spectrum were always truthful, very good at repetitive tasks that bore other people, who were very eager to work. And in fact, he realized that there were people that he had hired, in the spectrum, didn't want to go back home after during the weekends because they didn't see the logic of not having to work in the weekends. So, but anyway, so he thought about this, focusing on their strengths, and he found jobs for testing. I think there were 21 people in the initial cohort that he employed. This was in India, at that time, and he realized he ran a 2-year study. In the 2 years, the people who were in the spectrum completely 100% of them outperformed the regular software engineers in their ability to test. And it became a Harvard case study. He presented this at the UN and CNN and Forbes. Everybody covered that. So, and from that, a lot of other things expanded. Now he runs the India Inclusion Summit. Now, the reason why I'm sharing that story is, and I was also listening to a talk from another gentleman named Matthew Gonering, who mentioned that the best way to create an idea, create a workspace where you get to know people and grow in your workplace is to surround yourself with people with different perspectives. And that way they started employing people with disabilities, different parts of disabilities, different kinds of disabilities, and making them active working members of the workforce. So they feel belong, they feel. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is it doesn't have to be disability inclusion. It can be inclusion in the smallest ways, in how we perceive people and how we respond to it with compassion. And again, just to go back very quickly to those 4 steps, to simply notice, to feel for the other person by applying the golden rule, to suspend our judgments that come in the way of our compassionate response, and then finally asking, what can I do to alleviate that response? And if I am the person who is not feeling included, once again applying those steps, but managing the emotions not as a victim, but as a person of who creates change, who architects change, and creating opportunities that include building resource groups, educating ourselves, building the awareness of what we can. So I think that's where compassion becomes a very powerful tool against non-inclusion. So that's my spiel about compassion and inclusion. I would like to, I think we have a few more minutes for questions. I would love to
It was very
get your
good.
thoughts.
First of all, it was very good.
Thank you, Carol.
Applauding you.
Thank you.
Well, I have several things came to my mind as I was listening to your presentation. Something that just is happening right now. I have a friend who is Filipino, been in my organization of Rotary for many, many years, and haven't really gotten to know him very well. And I'm so busy that, and it's not that I don't include him, but I say, hello, how are you? Good to have you here. That's it. And you go on to the next person. You say, hello, how are you? Nice to see you. Glad you came today. And then I've got to go over here and do this. And then, hello, how are you? And so I haven't really given him, because I don't really understand. He's got a thick accent. So it's sometimes, and I haven't really taken the time to sit and listen to his thick accent. But when he stands to share something about Rotary in the Philippines or something, I'm missing like 3/4 of his message because I don't really clearly understand him. So I'm not judging him, but I distance myself a little bit by just saying, hi, how are you? You know, good to see you. And then going on. So I've got him included now. I met another Filipino person in San Jose who's working on the Little Free Libraries with me. And she told me she wanted, she has a sister in the Philippines who has a school and doesn't have books for the school or a playground, and could Rotary help? Oh, wow. I have a Rotarian in my club that's on my board because I couldn't find any more board members. So I put him on my board, but he said, what do I need to do? I said, well, just show up at a board meeting and show up at a meeting. He was worried because he's busy babysitting grandchildren. No, just be there. And I didn't really know how I could get him included and feel a part of the group. So I called him yesterday and I said, I'd like to meet with you, because I thought maybe meeting with him at his house in person, I would be able to understand what he's saying. But I understood him on the phone, and he said, just share all the information with me and we'll work on it. That is the step in the door. And I am looking forward to doing an international project with another Rotary, with Dione. And I hope that this will, make him feel part, because I don't feel like he comes to a Zoom meeting and he doesn't say anything. He'll come to a meeting and he doesn't say anything, and nobody says anything to him other than hi, welcome. And I hope this will be a inclusion for him, and we will get to know him better. And I hope that the club will accept listening to him, and I'm going to push for this project to go forward, and he'll feel empowered.
That's beautiful.
I mean, it's just happening right now, but sometimes you just think, oh, we don't hear much from this person. Maybe he doesn't feel like speaking up because he doesn't feel, I don't know what he's feeling. I got to find out, how he's feeling, but I'm going to include him. So that's my big story for the moment.
Thank you, Carol. I think it's a beautiful story, and I really wish that your friend creates that trust enough to say, I can be myself in this setting.
Yes.
I feel included. So great first steps. Beautiful. Thank you.
I have another one. It's about autistic children. We have a Rotarian at the big San Jose downtown group, big 500 members, and her sister is autistic. And they're like maybe 5 or 6 years a difference. And so she has started an organization called the College of Adaptive Arts. So she has a college for all autistic children, and they participate. If they like art, then they're in an art class and they create an art class for them. If they like tennis, they create a tennis class for them. If they're in technology, they create a class for them, and they just soar. They're just so happy. And so I've had presentations from, I'm going to reconnect with her again to see how the college, because our Rotary has donated money, for tables or materials, whatever they needed. So, but you know what, here, these people have all flourished, these autistic children. Well, they're adults, they're young adults. They're like, there's no college after like you're 20 or 18 or 20 or 22. So these are like 30, 40-year-olds that are in a special college, going on further with their special talents.
Right.
So that's a nice story on
Beautiful.
people with disabilities or on a spectrum. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So we have just a couple minutes more. Does anybody have a quick thought or comment or question before we wind up?
Well, I have, Emmanuel, I recognize the value that you bring. Thank you for wonderful stories and videos about inclusion. And it occurred to me that the panda story and the tiger and the bird really were missing one thing. And I think we can learn from that as human beings. And here's what they're missing. They're missing the ability to just wave their feathers, wave their paws. They don't know that they can't speak to each other. Obviously, they were speaking English, but we know they don't really speak English, don't we? But they can wave something, and it's a universal thing, especially as fun. Carol's talking about somebody in the Philippines that maybe you can't understand them, but what is universal is the wave. We can wave our hands. So, and I looked at your formula, Emmanuel, and I like the formula. Here's what I might suggest in the world that we're in the universal world. Waving comes first. You wave your hand. It's universal.
Okay.
Before you even speak, you don't say hi, you wave. And then after you wave, you smile. And after you wave and after you smile, then you just listen and wait for what happens. You don't have to say words, because we're in a global society that my English may not be your English, or my mi español tal vez no es tu español, or we are speaking different language, but universal is the wave, and more universal is the smile, and more universal is listening to space. And I think I use that formula, especially because I am I have a mask. First of all, I can't speak with a mask, not normally, but when I'm out and about, but I can wave. People don't see me if I'm smiling, if I'm wearing a mask.
Yeah.
We're in a world that wears masks for the next few years, maybe forever, or maybe the rest of my lifetime. So waving becomes more universal, and they may not be able to see your smile, but sometimes the crinkles in the eyes, or the eyes can smile, but certainly looking at that person, that's always a smile, and then just wait and listen. I think I would encourage you to use that kind of formula. I've been using it for so many days, probably not many days, but I thought, oh, I got to use this more often and share it with whoever I know.
That was
Beautiful,
great.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
fantastic. Listen, that's the big word, listen.
Yeah, totally. So
Listen.
I just looked at the time. It looks like we are at the hour dot. With that wonderful message from Rocky, I would say thank you with the wave, and I really appreciate the time that Marilyn has created. Again, Marilyn, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if you want to reach out and we want to continue the conversation, I would love to. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm
I'd like his contact in the chat, if he would.
Oh,
If you would do
yeah, so just put under chat.
so there's my contact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Emmanuel@compassionleaders.com. That's my company.
I don't see it.
Great. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I've always enjoyed your presentations. They're always heartwarming and very educational.
Thank you, Marilyn.
You know, a pause for reflection, you know.
Yeah.
So
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And you all have a lovely day. Rest of
yeah,
the day.
you too.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you. So I am having I was been chatting with support because I got locked out of this call for some reason. I couldn't get back in, but I guess I'm here, so that's good. But now we're trying to figure out, okay, I had to join through a different way, but anyway, it's all good. So anyway, thank you for everybody to hang in there. I'm here twice. I don't know why I'm here.
It's better than once.
So anyway, there we go. But I guess tech support is going to work on it behind the scenes. But anyway, whatever happened, I hit record and I disappeared and I couldn't get back in. And so, but anyway, I want to continue on. Tech support will do whatever it needs to do. So I hope you enjoyed Emmanuel, and he's an awesome speaker. I've always enjoyed his presentations and his talks. So please, yeah, hang on and hang in there for a little bit longer. And so our next speaker is, I believe, is Kaldep. You pronounce his name, as somebody said, you remind you that you're jumping into a cool dip. And that's how you pronounce his name. It's like you're jumping into a cool pool of water. So Kaldep. So is that right?
Yes, very much so. You want to go to Hawaii and you want a cool dip, because it's too hot.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to let you take over. I was disable video receiving. Okay. I don't know. I have to somehow want to record. Okay. This meeting's being recorded. Okay. Got it. Okay, so we're being recorded and I'll just
Mary Lynn, I usually see that on the screen. As soon as you put recording, I usually say, it usually says this session is being recorded. I don't see that.
Yeah, because it's been recorded since this morning, and
Okay.
because I'm having technical difficulties,
Okay.
you're not likely going to see that.
Okay, got it.
Actually, the red light is flashing saying it's recording. So
Yeah, so I can stop recording now, but I'll just continue on. And so I'm going to give you the floor so that I could figure out how to get you in there, not me. And I don't need to be talking anymore. I'm done. Okay, there we go. And I can't. You know what? I'm going to probably jump off and try to redo this. So I'm going to transfer Kalip to you to be the co-host. And can you please, if anybody wants to come in to the meeting, can you please let them in? And there we go. And I'm going to opt out again. Okay, carry on.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to end the meeting. I'm leaving. I'm leaving the meeting.
Good. I'm here. Well, thank you, Marilyn. Really appreciate being over here. And I know you put me in a tough spot. Trying to follow Kung Fu Panda? Come on, you know. I really should have negotiated a better spot. But Emmanuel, I really, really enjoyed your talk. I think it's really insightful. And, you know, we can all learn, it's one of the things that's needed. We talk about it, but trying to put it in practice is a very different challenge. And I think so we all understand that, and we face it every day. Today, I'm going to veer the talk a little bit differently. Rather than talking about corporations and how to change people, I'm going to talk about strategies, 4 strategies that I use to really, really, survive. I've used it in corporations. I've used it myself. So I'm going to jump into it, my personal story. So, I was really hesitant to talk about my personal story, but Marilyn sort of said, you need to share the story. You need to share the lessons, of your personal story. Hopefully, it provides some insights. November 9th, 2017, I was driving on 580. For those of you who are in the Bay Area, you'll know the freeway really well, by Oakland. It was nighttime, the first major rainfall. As I was driving in the heavy rain, there was water on the ground. I suddenly hit an oil patch. My car goes 90 degrees. It skidded. It went 90 degrees to the freeway. I'm still doing about 70 miles per hour. I tried to correct it, straighten into the freeway. I did 2 barrel rolls. I ended up upside down, 20 feet below on an on-ramp. I'm not sure how many minutes later, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes later, I saw some lights flashing, and I heard voices saying, someone's watching over you. There are 2 cops. What was fascinating about the whole thing was, number one, I was perfectly fine. I'm over here today. But the first instinct for me was not to sort of say, am I okay? Am I bleeding? Am I, do I have a hemorrhage or anything else? I calmly reached out, because the whole car was in shambles, everything flying all over the place. I picked up the phone and called the person who was expecting me at night to say, I'm caught up in an accident. I won't be able to, see them tonight. In retrospect, it didn't occur to me at that time. But in retrospect, I started thinking about what was different about that act compared to what most people would have done. Most people would have been screaming, hysterical, looking at, oh, my car has been damaged, or there's personal damage to me. It was a fascinating 3 or 4 minutes of my life, which I reflected on. So today, I'm really going to sort of go back to my survival story, because despite the fact it was very dramatic and I survived, and everyone still wonders how come, I didn't walk away a dead person in that crash. I'll talk about my survival story and experiences I gained along the way. Hopefully, the lessons that I learned can be applied by everyone to really navigate tough challenges in personal life in the corporate world and, in family situations. And the real question becomes, why do some people really manage tough situations and all, and other people don't? So I've, in reflecting my entire life story and how I've managed all these things over the past so many years, I've come up with 4 different strategies. But first of all, what is it called? I think so Marilyn sort of pointed out to me that, you're not talking about compassion, you're not talking about survival, you're really talking about resilience. Oh, okay. So what's resilience? Resilience is a capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. When you don't expect things to happen, things will happen. And how do you sort of recover from that? So let's get back to my story. So as I mentioned, I've worked with big companies like General Electric, Toshiba. I turned around, I started operations in Europe, Asia, and all. And I know a lot about people, dynamics, and all. But in the industry, I'm sort of known as a turnaround guy. If Jack was in trouble, I'm talking about Jack Welch, if he was in trouble anywhere with General Electric, with our divisions, he'd sort of send me over there and say, fix it. But in the corporate world, I'm pretty much known as Mr. Fix-It guy. Never realized the same strategies I was using in the corporate world, I'm going to apply to myself. So we all have a reason to wake up. Mine came seven years ago. I got diagnosed with AML leukemia, not the easy one. It's a very difficult one. The chance of survival is less than 10%. And that really started my whole journey between being a person and being a patient. Now, patient and patience, they're 2 good words. People don't realize the actual meaning of patient. Patient is actually a term that means one who suffers. I didn't realize that my journey is going to embark and I'm going to suffer for a long time. I really expected that things like I'm going to walk into the hospital, I have all the tools in the world, within 7 days, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, I'm going to walk away. Perfect. I was in the hospital for 5 years. In my case, they gave me a 10% chance to survive. And it really sort of gave me time to reflect, to say, okay, what do I do? How do I do? And how do I navigate myself? Unfortunately, when they gave me the chemotherapy, my bone marrow collapsed. So suddenly I became the bubble boy. Not only was I a leukemia patient, I was confined to a 10 by 10 room. Anyone coming over there had to be monitored. They had to wear gas masks and everything else. And I became the proverbial bubble boy in the thing. So I learned very quickly that in life, shit happens. We cannot control what happens in life. Suffering happens, discontinuity happens in corporations and all. We just have to accept it. And the funny thing is, if you accept it, you can take on the next steps in terms of what to do, how to do, and stuff like that. For me, rather than putting my affairs in order, like my physician suggested, they all sort of said, Kuldeep, you have 10% chance to live. Now that your bone marrow has collapsed, you have even less chance to live. Why don't you put your affairs in order? We'll send a priest. They'll pray for you and everything else. And I took the totally opposite approach. I said, you know what? I'm still alive. I can still take control my outcome. Let me sort of decide what to do, what not to do. So fast forward, after about 6 months, after the 6 months in the hospital, I decided that rather than blaming people and blaming anyone I could think about, to say that I'm not doing well and all, let me go and try to find a solution. So in a way, I figured out that I have to come up with a way not only to survive, but also lead the team, which is my medical care team, my doctors and all, to help them navigate me. So in a way, I found the strength on how I could help not only myself, but other patients, like me going forward. Unfortunately, in today's age, everyone talks about quick hits and, about what to do. But in my case, I knew that the chances were really, really, difficult. So where I had to decide what to do, when to do, and all, I had to literally choose one thing at a time, what to concentrate on, because it's overwhelming. I'm not a doctor by training, especially not an oncologist or a leukemia specialist. I literally had to narrow down and sort of say, what can I do to keep myself alive tonight? Many times the answers were with my doctors. They weren't with the priests, but I had to actually sit down and literally pick up the phone, call Fred Hutch, Sloan Kettering, whoever the who's who in leukemia and bone marrow transplants were, to say how to sort of do that. So it sort of brings me to the second thing that I think that we all have to accept, and that is we really have to be good at choosing what we concentrate on. Just like in the movies they show, everything is going wrong. You can actually go back and sort of say, okay, I can only control this, I can only do this, and then wait for the outcome. I literally took the same strategy to sort of say, this is what I'm going to concentrate on. This is what I'm going to do, and wait for the outcomes. So eventually, in my case, we ended up doing a experimental technique to sort of say, you're going to die over here. So the first thing I did was I literally walked out of the hospital. I was in a community hospital setting where they did the chemotherapy. I sort of made up my mind that there's no way I can live over here. I'm going to die. I was living on transfusions and everything else. Sounds wonderful. You get free accommodation, you get free food. And I called my Dracula diet at that time. But in a way, I also knew that I will not be able to survive over there for long. So one day I woke up, put my clothes on, and I said, I'm leaving the hospital and looking for a hospital that can help me. So the doctors told me, cool, you're going to walk away from here. Technically I'm refusing treatment. You're going to, there's a good chance you're not going to make it. But I looked at my situation realistically to say, okay, what are my options? And what are the things I can control? The only thing I could control was what hospital I go to next. And I also accepted the fact that if I stay over here, I can't change the outcome. So these are the common traits I'm finding out with the other people who are sort of survivors and, with the same token, the resilient people. Ultimately, we did the experimental technique. Surprisingly, I did well. But I also knew, because it was an experimental technique and it wasn't a bone marrow match for me, I only had a few months to live. So, again, but I was able to navigate from that one situation where it was hopeless and a certain death sentence to one where I had a chance to live and move forward. So it brings back to another question: is resilience inherited skill, or can it be taught? I strongly believe some people have it naturally. They learn it in childhood while growing up. But these are strategies and skills that can be taught. They can be learned. At Penn State, they're running a program. I think that they started about eight to 9 years ago to teach resilience in young kids. And they came up with different strategies that seem to work. Number one is to focus on positive outcomes. What a lot of people would call visioning, positive visioning. It's pretty effective to the point that the US military is using it, the techniques from the program, to help soldiers who are coming back from war, from the Middle East and stuff like that. So it's really, really powerful. But I strongly believe that resilience can be built. As I talked to patients and I started talking to doctors, we started using some of the techniques I was using, some of the strategies I was using with other patients, and we started seeing some better positive outcomes. I guess 5 years in a hospital, the only thing I'm missing is MD degree, but that's a story for another day. But the next question that comes up is, even if you do that, how do you know whether, or how do you assess whether you're making the right decisions or not? And that is, I think, so one of the big challenges that we all have in terms of you acknowledge the fact that things are out of control. You decide what to choose on, but how do you determine whether you're doing the right thing or not? And the only metric I had in my life was if I was waking up the next morning. But in corporate environments, in life, I think that there's some good measures we can put in place, or there are good measures in place to sort of say, are we moving ahead as a group or not? And I think that that's a great strategy that can be implemented very, very quickly. But in my case, I was waking up in the morning. I knew I had another day. I had another chance to call who's who in the world to see what to do next. From the get-go, I picked my medical team. When I was at Kaiser, the first doctor they assigned to me, I sort of said, I don't like their style. They were really good, very capable, but I decided that they weren't the right fit for me. When I ended up at Stanford, I chose, they showed me all the doctors. No one wanted to take my case because I was the walking dead. But what we did find out was there was one young doctor who was really good in terms of their credentials, but they were young. We had an honest discussion about my case. The prognosis hadn't changed, but what had changed was her willingness to actually work with me. And whenever we came on into a difficult junction, we would say, here are the options, and it's high risk, but let's try it to keep me alive. And we had to make those decisions about 400 to 500 times over 5 years. So I'm a medical first in a lot of ways. I'm the only, according to my doctors, I'm the only first who survived the bone marrow aplasia where my bone marrow wasn't, or my body wasn't producing blood for over a year. There's no bone marrow match for me, but I got 3 bone marrow transplants. The last transplant, we did 2 transplants in one because there wasn't enough cord blood from one donor. One donor was from Louisiana, the other one was from Singapore. And the one from Singapore, the donor was infected with Hep C. So I had to figure out a way to treat the Hep C before they injected me. In other words, a lot of unknowns, but a good team really, really helped me. And I think so we find out that if you follow the 3 strategies and you build a great team, it's a great recipe for success. Along with that, I think that one of the things that we all need is a strong belief system. I think that the movies really talk about a belief system without talking about it in a big, big way. But just talking about my teamwork and everything else, right after I'd survived leukemia, I was sort of okay. My mom passed away. She was from India, so I had to go to India to sign all the papers and all for her estate. It's a requirement by the law, by the Indian government, if you don't have any siblings in the country to do that. My doctor recommended against going over there because if anything went wrong, I had less than 2 hours to live. Against their advice, I went over there. They made all the backup arrangements, backup clinics in Switzerland, in Finland, in Sweden. In case something went wrong, I could fly over there and be treated. I got sick. I was flying back to San Francisco on a United flight. We were over the Atlantic. My situation started deteriorating really fast. I was virtually collapsing. The pilot had to make a decision whether to land the plane in New York, as soon as we cross over, or in Chicago, because it's a United flight, and those are the 2 big hubs. At my urging, we were able to patch in my doctor. So between the pilot, me, and the doctor, we made a decision, a life and death decision, to sort of say, we can drop the plane in New York, offload you, but the problem is we do not know what hospital they're going to take you to. And number 2, whether they'll have they're suited to take care of a bone marrow transplant patient. Same thing with Chicago. So obviously San Francisco was an additional 4 to 5 hours away. So we jointly made a decision that we'll carry on to San Francisco. I knew the risks, that there was a 40 or 50% chance I'm not going to make it. But at least if I landed in San Francisco, I knew I would get care right away. So that's where the teamwork came in for me in a big, big way. But in the corporate world, I see that literally every other day. So it really brings back to a real common thing. Why do some people have resilience and some people don't? I think so the 3 strategies or the 4 strategies, by the time you take the teamwork aspect of it into play, it is easy to identify, it's easy to talk, but it takes a lot of patience, it takes practice, and I think so that's where a lot of people give up. They don't want to practice it long enough. But I'm over here, I'm a living testament. My insurance company is probably the only group in that's not thankful because they ended up writing a huge check for my survival. But it really does help people. And I think so it can impact not even individuals, but even corporations. I know people talk about corporate resilience in terms of IT and everything else, but it's the people who need to build a resilience in them. It's the people and who have to build the teams who are resilient and who can overcome any odds. I know we can live, I'm living, I'm thriving today. And I'm pretty sure we can teach these traits and these strategies to people for them, to be successful in life. For that, I'm always grateful. Well, thank you, Marilyn. Marilyn?
Well, I don't know where she is, but it was a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that powerful story. And you're an amazing person. And yes, you can't change things that cannot be changed, but you can go forward and get results if you just stay calm.
Yeah, and the funny thing is people, the one thing I didn't touch about is I talked about myself. You bring out the best in people if you're resilient.
Yeah, you do.
The same doctor who let the patients are dying, she took the time and we become the best of friends. She'll call me up and sort of say, how are you doing and all, despite the fact I haven't seen her 2 years in a row. But they sort of learned things and they're teaching these lessons to other patients. I left GE, 20 plus years ago. I still get calls from our European operations, from Indian operations, from Chinese operations to say, hey, the strategies you played helped us become huge.
That's huge.
So, and it's all about people.
It is.
Yeah.
I have to go, Mary Lynn, so I have to sign off right now, but I loved all the speakers this morning. They were great.
Yeah, great. Well, see you back this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Bye.
But yeah, it's a great story, and I'm glad that you shared it. So you still have some time till 11. So I don't know, what do you want to do until 11? Or we could just have a conversation, I
Carry
guess.
on the conversation and
If anybody has any things they would like to discuss, it's just see. I've had a couple of people come on and bounce off. So anyway.
Thank you for sharing that, Kuldeep. I think it's a powerful, powerful story. And these kinds of experiences where you are so close to the other side, and then you're coming back, you're given another chance. I think it's incredible that you have the resilience to share that story. That's for one. I used to work in a senior care center. I had 17 people pass away in my care. So that's kind of the reason why I even actually went into compassion training and all that, because there was a way of me dealing with realities. But I'm curious to know, how did that experience, beyond these learnings about resilience, how did that change you as a person, your gratitude, your daily approach to life? How has that changed?
That's a talk by itself, but I think if I share my background a little bit, it'll help you. My dad was a diplomat. I grew up all over the world. And one of the things my dad really emphasized on me is that people are different. They bring different ideas and different cultures, right? And the easiest way to read people and learn about people or cultures is by going to the places where they pray or they do the spiritual practice. So I spent a lot of time in pagodas in Burma, in the, in the tribal customs in Africa, in the Catholic churches in Europe, in the temples in Japan and all. But I learned very quickly that everyone has a different take in terms of what life is, what death is, and what afterlife is all about. So in a way, I wasn't really, I'm not afraid of that, of dying or anything else. But what was fascinating to me was every time I was in a real difficult situation, I knew someone is going to help me. And I'm not just talking about people on the ground. I'm going to get some divine help. Now, to make matters much more official, in between my remission and relapse, which was about 4 to 5 months, I got blessed by Father Perry, who's the head of the Franciscan Church of the Vatican. He invited me to come over to the Vatican for the 800th anniversary of the Franciscans and pray with Pope Francis. The head rabbi in Israel, through a friend of mine, did a prayer for me at the Wailing Wall. I met Kutenla, who is the head oracle of Dalai Lama, and he prayed 3 hours with me, gave me blessings before I went back to the hospital, and to make sure that I was covered. From the religious side, their divine mothers like Amachi, Karunamai, and all, I got blessings from all of them. So it was fascinating. The whole world, all the different factors, all the spiritual practices, literally met with me. I interacted with them. And what was fascinating was the 5-year journey at Stanford. Every time I had a downtime, in other words, I wasn't doing well, and it took me 5 times to critical care, where they ask you for the next of kin, they come bless you and everything else. I was at total peace. And while they were blessing me, or they were doing this, their critical care services or administering critical care services, I was talking to them about next steps. What to do, what not to do, what are they doing, and can I intervene and help them? And I think so that was a big part of me being very optimistic rather than giving up.
Yeah, it's always interesting how the things that we learn that we have to do or we don't do, and how that all works, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, when we were born, our parents don't get a download on how to help us.
Yeah.
And we don't get that as we're living through life. They're apps, but apps bring their own idiosyncrasies with them in terms of your reliance on them, your realization after you rely on them that they're good to guide you or to lead you a certain way. But if you're in trouble, don't count on it. They're not going to help you. But I think so my most compassionate conversations were with patients who would walk in totally oblivious to what was going in front of them, or what are the journey in front of them, or their caregivers. I was lucky where I had a really compassionate doctor, both at Kaiser and Stanford, really compassionate doctors. As I mentioned in my plane story, how many doctors would come on a phone call on a Sunday morning with a pilot and a patient? And that's only part of the story. There are a lot of other tidbits. But I would talk to a lot of patients, and started a foundation to help other patients, primarily for that, how to prepare them for what to expect when you go through this kind of thing, and how to prepare financially and everything else. No one talks about that. Just like in corporations, you can talk about resilience, you can talk about integration, you can talk about inclusion and everything else. No one talks when you don't have the money, you're laying people off, you're not talking about, how to keep the company together. 22 years ago, when the market crash happened, I'd funded about 15 or 20 companies through my investment portfolio. All my, investor friends, as the market started crashing, they went out and emptied the bank accounts of the companies that funded. And I sort of left them over there saying that, hey, I funded them for good reason. I believed in them and all. Most of the companies folded. One company, eventually went public. So different people approach life differently, but to me, you have to look at a holistic view.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really bits and pieces. It's really about the whole perspective. Like you were talking about, you started your talk about strategies.
Mhm.
Okay. What are your strategies and how are you going to get well? Who are you going to work with? Where are you going to go? And then from there, the rest of it is really, sometimes the strategy is just to trust the process. Sometimes the strategy is just say, okay, I'm going to do my best. And even if I'm suffering right now, I'm going to do my best to live, or just say, okay, God, if you got to have me, take me, kind of thing. But it's really about sometimes just surrendering everything that is, right?
Yeah, no. And at least what I found out personally is if you challenge God, he'll give you leeway.
He'll what?
He'll give you leeway. In other words, if you challenge God, if my time is up, take me away. He'll say, you stay down there. I've got other problems in hand. For me, it worked. I went 6 times in critical care. They blessed me and everything else 6 times. And I'm here.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Very
Beautiful
good.
story, Kuldeep, and thank you for sharing this. I think it's resilience as a topic. You're right. I think what goes in for the person goes for the company as well. It's in the mind state, and I am glad that you shared these perspectives. So
Yeah, and in a way, I'm hesitant talking about myself, and I really appreciate Marilyn sort of pushing me into talking about myself. I'm much more comfortable talking about corporate stuff because it's not about me; it's about someone else. I'm not being vulnerable on stage, and you'll probably notice that I'm opening up right now.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about corporations is most managers don't think about resilience in the true sense. They talk about financial viability and people and all, but they don't look at people when they hire people. They don't look at the corporate setup and the infrastructure on how to overcome obstacles, ups and downs in the business. And what teams, because even if you got 100 people in the company, there's a small team that has to execute for different things. And they don't really build that resilient team to say, okay, under this crisis, I'm going to count on this team. On this crisis, I'm going to count on that team. One of the things we learned at General Electric, this under Jack Welch, is we would actually have small virtual teams based on the task at hand. And we would basically form the teams. We would choose who our team leaders would be. We would choose who our team members would be. And there were small teams, anywhere from 3 to 5 people. But our task was to literally take a process or problem, solve it in 3 to 5 months, and then train everyone else. And I think so that was a big part of my story that made me survive, because Stanford did not have the answers for me, but I was able to reach out to Fred Hutch when I had the problem about the Hep C and trying to put